Next, I want to add some additional material on tropical rainforests. The lectures I provided before were more focused on California, and California doesn't have tropical biomes, so I wanted to add a bit more on the tropical biomes, including tropical rainforests. So tropical rainforests are the most biologically diverse amongst all of the ecosystems. That means there are more different types of species within tropical environments than there are outside. The primary type of vegetation is broadleaf evergreen trees. And what that means is they're broadleaf, but they don't shed their leaves in the wintertime. Now, why don't they shed their leaves in the wintertime? Because there is no wintertime. So remember that tropical environments are warm throughout the year, so there is no real seasons. So rather than lose their leaves in the wintertime or in the fall, what they do is they constantly are shedding leaves all throughout the year. Another thing about tropical rainforests is that they have a dense multi-layered canopy, and we'll illustrate that in a moment. And then also the soils. We talked a little bit about oxasols in the soil lecture. And what happens in rainforests is that there is a lot of nutrients right at the surface of the soil, but it's very nutrient poor underneath there. That's why the trees tend to have these weird, wide, shallow roots, because the roots take in nutrients right from the forest floor and close to the surface, and they don't tap really deep because there's not that much nutrients deep into the soil. So just to give you an example of the biological diversity, that tropical rainforests are about 7% of the land area on Earth. However, they have more than 50% of the species of Earth. So even though they don't cover a large amount of the land surface, they have most of the species. And we'll include a film that illustrates some of that. Okay. This is a figure showing biodiversity in the tropics, and these red zones, including the Amazon here. This is the Amazon Basin in South America. And it is the largest tropical rainforest, and it's the most biologically diverse. And so these red colors are where you have higher biodiversity or more number of different species. Now you also see this, to a lesser extent, in Central Africa and into Southeast Asia. All right, so one reason you have such high biodiversity is the structure of the tropical forest environment, that not only do you have a single layer of forest, you have multiple layers of forest. You have a main canopy, you have trees that get by underneath there, what's called an understory, and you have a ground layer of plants as well as emergence, that trees that can shoot above the tropical rainforest and get sunlight up there. And within all of these different types of plant layers, there's also different kinds of vines and other types of living things that coexist with the trees. And for all of these, you also have different types of pollinators, different kinds of insects. So, and then also other types of living things that live in the different layers of the forest. So the trees provide a structure that gives you a lot more types of living things in a rainforest than other types of places. And one thing we talked about, abiotic versus biotic, that rainforests have excellent abiotic conditions, that there's plenty of warmth and water, that's not a limiting factor. But what becomes a limiting factor is what's called biologic control. So if you think about sunlight, there's so much competition for sunlight in a tropical rainforest that the emergence will get 100% of the sunlight. The main canopy now is down to 3/4 of the sunlight. The under canopy only gets about half sunlight. By the time you get to the shrub level, you're down to about 1/4 sunlight. So each layer is competing for sunlight. And they each have different adaptations. Some shoot up through the canopy to get the sunlight, and the ones at the bottom can get by with less. So houseplants, for example, are often plants that have evolved in these low light conditions in the shrub layer of a rainforest. This is a figure showing using remote sensing to classify different kinds of trees in a tropical rainforest. So unlike many forests in the mid-latitudes outside of the tropics, There, you can have different types of trees within the same area, many, many different types of trees within a small area because of this diverse environment. So you can, all these different colors represent different species of trees. So a high biodiversity. All right, and another note about the soils that you have rich surface soil, and so these trees have these wide, shallow roots that take that up, but you have poor quality underneath, that the rain really washes away a lot of the nutrients, and there's not very much leftover organic material. That there's so much of the organic material in the rainforest gets absorbed right at the surface and is not left over to work its way down into the soil. So just, for example, these are two soil profiles. On the left is a tropical soil, and on the right is a mid-latitude grassland soil, or a steppe grassland soil. And in a grassland, the roots of the grasses work their way into the soil and form this deep A horizon, or topsoil. However, that's not true in tropical environments. In fact, there's a very shallow layer of organic material right at the top and very poor quality underneath. And there's also a lot of oxidation that's occurring. They're highly weathered. That's why it has that red color, is because they are rusted. So a lot of the nutrients wash away, leaving behind iron, and the iron can get rusty. When it comes to human activity, people, particularly indigenous people who live in rainforests, often have to practice what's called slash and burn agriculture, or shifting cultivation. This is where what they do is they take a plot in the rainforest and they cut down the vegetation and burn it. And the reason they burn it is to add nutrients to the soil. However, those nutrients do get depleted over time, and then people have to move on or shift to another location. So this is showing a clearing in a rainforest where people have a garden that they're growing food, but at some point they'll have to move on to another place so that they can start over again with new burn material and new nutrients.